To Savi Contemporary, it's full house today. Probably because Arjun is around. We are very honored to have all of you around. Thank you for coming. It's quite cold in Berlin today, and I think beds are warmer than Savi these days. I think the bars are also warmer than Savi, so if people come here, we do appreciate that a lot. Thank you, Gabby. Thank you, Arjun, for coming, for taking the time. We know how full your schedule is, so we do appreciate that a lot. What? Exactly, that one too. Thanks a lot, Jonas, Tinius, and the Anthropology of Art Network for co-organizing this. It's the beginning of hopefully a long-term and exciting collaboration. We shall see. Jonas has been very much around. Yeah, I think he moved to Berlin last summer, and he's been quite a good visitor of our events, and we started using him as a sparring partner. So thanks for developing this together. And then I would like to thank the people that make this happen. You know, Savi is a non-for-profit space, completely non-defunded even. And we have some 15 people that have been working here for the past, now 8 years, trying to make this happen. It's always been a challenge, but they're there, and I do not find the words, and I cannot find the words to thank them enough for that. So all 15, 17, or 20 of them, I very much appreciate that. Thank you. I would like to start by saying that we're very honored to have you, we're very proud to have you here, to have you start the year, the Savi year. You might not know this, but you've kind of been very much present in our thinking, and we have kind of been a shadow, that kind of invisible shadow, accompanying you for the past 10 years or so, at least in my case. And so the work you've done, you've written, has framed us, has strongly influenced the conceptualization and practice of this art space that wishes to reflect on conceptions and misconceptions of the West and the non-West. An art space that claims for itself a laboratory status, a space that wishes to see itself in a constant state of becoming, an art space for performativity that finally just performs itself. So, when I stumbled on the social life of things, commodities, and cultural perspective, in my case, and I must confess, only 10 years ago, it really played an important role in understanding and questioning the meaning we attribute to artworks. So I'll speak from that perspective because that is my perspective. It was important to me in a time when I was finding a language and theoretical backing in an effort to express what I thought was the epistemology of objects and how they take and change shape upon circulation. We have also had to look at the social life of things recently while writing about perceptions of refugees as objects in relation to a longer history of dehumanization, objectification, and commodification of humans. This was very necessary at a point where, again, I speak from this perspective from Germany, where the discourse, the public discourse here, had shifted from a humanitarian to a value discourse. That is, you were welcome as a refugee if you were valuable, if you could add value to the society. From my side, in the past 2-3 years, if there's something like an art world, it has been fascinated, and it's been kind of an infatuation, actually, with concepts of the future. And I think it's no coincidence that these things happen after Arjun's 2013 publication, The Future as a Cultural Fact. So we are somewhere there trying to understand what he's doing. And Xavi, of course, was part of that. When we did the project Giving Contours to Shadows, one of the chapters was pre-writing history, and we're very much looking at these, you know. So that said, I would want to use this opportunity to thank you again for finding the time and for allowing us to be your shadow in this past 10 years, and looking forward to continuing. So thanks a lot. Jonas would say a word or two as co-host of this, and then so as we do at Xavi, hospitality is a very, very important part of our practice. So there's a lot to drink, there's a lot of food. So after this, take your time and stay with us. We do not have time limits here, so you can stay until 6 a.m. and if you want to stay longer, you're free. But Arjun has to leave at 9 p.m. So thanks once more for coming.
So before saying a word about Arjun, I'd just like to thank again Bonaventure and his whole team for hosting us tonight. They're doing all of this amazing work as a not-for-profit and largely unfunded project space, which I think deserves recognition. Thanks again especially to Anna for communicating the event so well, and for Gabi for joining us here tonight as well. Arjun Appadurai is the Goddard Professor in Media, Culture and Communication at New York University, where he's also Senior Fellow at the Institute for Public Knowledge. He serves as Honorary Professor and has held visiting professorships in a number of distinguished institutions, including the Department of European Ethnology of the Humboldt University here in Berlin, where he's currently based in collaboration with Professor Regina Röhnhüt. Arjun is also the founder and now president of KUKA, a non-profit organization based in and oriented to the city of Mumbai. During his academic career, he held professorial chairs at Yale University, the University of Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania, but he's known to us through his innumerable books and articles, many of which Bonaventure has already singled out, but which include, most recently, Banking on Words, The Failure of Language in the Age of Derivative Finance, which in part inspires his lecture this evening. Tonight then, he will be speaking about design, failure, and the globalization of risk, and we're delighted to have you with us, Arjun.
So thanks to both Jonas and Bonaventure and their colleagues at Xavi for making this occasion possible. So the title is Failure, Design, and the Globalization of Risk. And I begin with failure. Failure is something we experience and declare often. It further follows that failure is not seen in the same way at all times and in all places. Historical understandings of failure are prone to change, sometimes dramatically. And failure is always seen through the prism of language, context, and tradition, all of which imply that failure is a cultural fact. Ideas about failure circulate, and as they do so, they encounter other ideas about failure, producing hybrid ideologies and measures of failure, some of which acquire temporary dominance in many societies, while others retain an idiosyncratic cultural stamp. Thus, failure is a volatile and variable concept. Some of this variability is a matter of history and culture, while other parts of it are owed to the difference between fields, disciplines, and forms of knowledge. For philosophers, failure is a matter of norms, and these norms are themselves a product of complex debates in the history of ideas. For students of technology and design, which is what partly I'm going to be talking about today, failure is a peculiar feature of post-industrial ideas of system, predictability, convenience, and feedback, all increasingly incorporated into design technologies on a routine basis. For sociologists and historians concerned with capitalism, modernity, and globalization, failure is an outgrowth of powerful regimes of production, exploitation, and power, which have succeeded in conflating ideas of innovation, governance, and measurement so as to subject the poorer economies of the world to the ideologies of failure of those societies which are more wealthy and powerful than themselves. Especially in the US. This fervor has its roots in the mid-20th century, discovery of innovation, risk, and even crisis by such thinkers as Joseph Schumpeter. There's also a direct line from this embrace of innovation and volatility in capitalism to the peculiar centrality of potential failure in the recent design technologies of the post-industrial West. Our cities, our institutions, our policies, our politics, and our collective values are increasingly defined by such qualities as smartness, speed, and connectivity, rather than by values such as inclusiveness, equity, or justice. The everyday habit of seeing ourselves as users is the linguistic edge of this process. It is easy to see how the technologically induced transformation of such other words as printing to describe 3D reproduction, searching as defined by Google, and liking as normalized by Facebook, follows a similar logic in which old meanings are both invoked and subverted by new devices and protocols. This logic can also be extended, now I add some terms, to such basic terms as identity, now often seen as a vulnerable form of intellectual property that can be stolen, and privacy, now mainly seen as a target of machinic surveillance. So there are many such linguistic examples, and they are in some ways a natural part of all periods of rapid technological change. But in our times, new meanings are so quickly circulated and naturalized as to make their changed implications seem minor, even though they have fundamental implications for our humanity, our sociality, and our solidarity. Such linguistic changes are part and parcel of subtle cultural shifts in regard to three things that I want to discuss briefly before I go to finance. One is the transformation of scale. The future emerging through design, that is the kind of design I'm talking about, demands a new way of thinking about scale in our lives as human beings. Scale has always been an important dimension of human life, and in prior eras, smallness and bigness had predictable relationships in regard to increasing size, distance, connectivity, and materiality. Above all, the scales of time and space had a relatively hierarchical connection in which nearness in space and time meant greater access and familiarity, and remoteness meant less knowledge and control. That hierarchy is no longer something we can take for granted. Scanning, sensing, screening, and reading have made the scales irregular, and smallness and nearness have collapsed into more obscure qualities due to the ubiquity of mediation and the saturation of our intimate spaces by big data, electronic connectivity, and mobile applications, which have also made our bodies increasingly into nodes in a complex, large-scale communication and data gathering universe. Secondly, so scale, visibility and invisibility. Although the professional and ideological worlds of contemporary design are aggressively secular, they are marked by utopian urges and thus share something with the ethos of religion in prior times. Among other things, religion has always been about ways to understand and manage the relationship between the visible and the invisible worlds. Human beings are always aware that their lives are deeply affected by invisible forces. Cosmologies and theologies seek to account for the ways that invisible forces shape visible realities. Magic and ritual help human beings to negotiate this boundary. The future that is emerging through our new designs changes the nature of the negotiation between the invisible and visible orders. One side of this negotiation is the screen on our laptops, our Kindles, our iPhones, and iPads. These screens now set the conditions in which we shape our lives as users, as citizens, as consumers, and as friends. We rely on our screens to keep us in social contact, to learn about the news, the weather, the stock market, and to play games, listen to music, and order taxis. The screen as an interface defines the site where the invisible becomes visible. As we develop new platforms, new servers, new tools, and new apps, the interface becomes the place where the world becomes visible, manageable, and available to us. And as this interface becomes more complex and more ubiquitous, we are becoming used to the new landscape of clouds, back to language, data mining, information farms, and the like. And we begin to regard them as new forms of nature, which are also becoming second nature to us. From this perspective, the future emerging through design is a sort of religious future, although it appears in the guise of technology. The last point I want to make about the implications of this new world of design beyond those linguistic symptoms, one is scale, one is visibility and invisibility. The third one is individuality, perhaps the most important and most relevant to what I'm going to say about finance in a minute. Most striking about the new materialities that shape the design of our emerging futures is that they may be changing the very bedrock of Western modernity, the category of the individual. That package of agency, value, motivation, personality, and choice that underlies our most common and taken for granted ideas about knowledge, justice, freedom, and sociality. Other societies in human history have had different ways to see the distribution of agency and personhood in the cosmos, and have seen human beings as only one crystallization among many that define agentive diversity. Often human societies have seen themselves as individuals, not individuals, but individuals, temporary assemblages of matter and meaning, quick to change in the process of interacting with other individuals, human or not, in an unstable universe of flows and exchanges. This sort of individual, I believe, is emerging again in our times with machinic protocols that divide us into attributes of wealth, race, location, taste, or class, so as to better determine our suitability for credit, insurance, educational assistance, welfare, or refugee status. Contemporary design also does not rely much on the classical individual, seen as a permanent repository of rights, capacities, and obligations, but is mostly oriented to individuals, clusters of tastes, locations, and biographies, which can be combined and recombined to create larger aggregations or patterns for the purpose of markets, states, or other large agencies. Thus, inevitably, the social is also changing its meaning and no longer indicates contractually organized, permanent, and well-defined groupings of individuals, but is now a constantly shifting array of individuals who can briefly connect through technological devices and affordances, but are no longer easy to unite in terms of such older categories as class, community, locality, or ethnicity. So I said already that old words are acquiring new meanings in our technology-driven and designed futures. I also suggested that this linguistic change is the symptom of a deeper set of cultural changes in such areas as scale, visibility, and individuality. I do not mean to be alarmist or to indicate that we are entering some sort of design dystopia. Rather, I suggest alertness to the tectonic shifts beneath our new conveniences, affordances, and utilities. Without such alertness, we will become victims of the volatility of the new world of design futures rather than its masters. This is a high-stakes moment. And I now want to offer an example of how design generates a level and type of risk in our world by looking a new level and type of risk in our world by looking closely at financial markets, and in particular the most important design innovation of the last 4 decades in finance, indeed in capitalism, which is the form called the derivative. So the derivative is a highly designed product. So it's a total product of intentional design of the most powerful abstract sort, and it is intimately connected to some of the most massive failures that we have witnessed in the last 10 to 20 years. So when I speak of finance, it's a direct link for me to design and to failure. So a primary threat to international order is the volatility of global financial markets. Capitalism capitalism today surrounds and saturates us in a way it never did before. In its home regions, notably in the US, it has taken the form of deep financialization. Finance now far exceeds the sphere of production and manufacture of industrial goods. Since the early 1970s, we've had the rapid development of a host of financial instruments which were barely imaginable in the time of Karl Marx. The breakthrough that made this financial explosion possible was the idea that risk itself could be monetized, allowing a small set of actors to take risks on risks. This is the core of the logic of the derivative, an instrument that has allowed financial technicians and managers to make virtually every part of our everyday lives susceptible to monetization. Now remember, I was writing this in the context of the US. It's always an empirical question how far this has come in Germany and India, but it is certainly not confined to the US. And it's an empirical question how far and how deep it has gone. The US is, as always, a pioneer in the cognization of these cases. In this way, so to make virtually every aspect of our everyday life susceptible to monetization. In this way, housing has now been turned into a machine for monetizing mortgages. So housing has now been turned into a machine for monetizing mortgages. The environment has been monetized through carbon trading and many other derivatives. Education has been captured through sophisticated methods of creating student debt. Health and insurance have been thoroughly penetrated by models of risk, arbitrage, and bets on the future. In short, everyday life is linked to capital, not so much by the mechanism of the surplus value of labor, but through making us all risk bearers whose aggregate risk can be endlessly combined and recombined to provide new forms of risk-taking and profit-making by the financial industries. Derivative instruments basically are bets that something underlying, that is not the derivative, will have a certain value at a certain point in time. It's always specific, 3 years, 5 years, etc. I say the value will be X, you say the value will be Y. It's about a future value. It becomes an endless vertical chain of things you can bet on, which are risks of other underlying things. But the distance from real physical commodities keeps growing. In other words, from beds and shoes and mattresses to these derivatives, the distance is very large, very abstract, very indirect, very quantitative. It can all, by the way, be understood. It's not mystical, but it is systematic abstraction, not of the thing, but of the risk of about the future value of the thing. Will it be X or will it be Y? So my risk is I'm making a bet that its value will be something. This simple principle is at the heart of the derivative form. And the derivative, by the way, is the thing itself is a piece of paper. It's a contract between two people, buying and selling. That's all it is. I say look at this, you may say look at that. We agree to sell and buy. That piece of paper. That's the derivative. So derivative in that sense is not abstract. It's a contract. Actually a contract. So we are all therefore laborers now, regardless of what we do, insofar as our primary reason for being is to enter into debt through being forced to monetize the risks of health, security, education, housing, and much else in our lives. This situation is most visible in the advanced capitalist countries, and hence the financial collapse of 2008 worldwide, but starting in the US, was primarily felt and amplified in these very countries. But very few countries in the world escaped the effects of the collapse, since finance capitalism is spreading its activities worldwide for at least the last 30 years. Still, many parts of the global south, including South Africa, for example, did not experience the shock of the collapse as profoundly as did the US and Europe. The buffers that created this measure of insulation were primarily that the new derivative logics, creating multiple loops between debt, risk, and speculation, were less advanced in these countries. They were less permitted, they were less developed. Another way to put it is that in the countries of the global south, the process by which all debt is made potentially monetizable through derivative instruments has been less rapid and more uneven than it has been in the countries of the North Atlantic. Nevertheless, the push to extend the derivative market is very intense. In spite of 2008, every country of which I'm aware, India, Russia, Brazil, and so on and so forth, the financial industries are pushing the reserve banks, the government, the regulators, say, you know, you really have to do this. And these institutions are defensive, saying we can do it, but we'll have this rule, we'll have that rule. It's a losing game. The derivatives market is growing. So, these countries, the banks, hedge funds, and insurance companies are aggressively pushing their way into new markets, seeking to lobby for legislation that allow them to bring the same untrammeled debt markets from which they profited to the countries of the global South. In my book, I spend some time on the subprime mortgage crisis, the famous mortgage crisis in the US, made even more famous by Michael Lewis's great book, The Big Short, which then became a quite wonderful movie. It's still a great explication of what happened in that market. And I think it's worth my taking a minute to say what that was, for those of you who may not have looked closely at what this mortgage collapse was. So, if you go back 50 years, before finance was growing, you know, people bought a home, they got a mortgage. 30 years, 25 years, they paid this much and so on. There was some method for calculating that. That was it till about 1970. And in the US, you know, home ownership is a dream. Virtually the definition of being an adult was owning a home. So mortgages were straightforward. They were loans with a certain special long-term structure. Somewhere in the early 70s when finance was taking off, some guy had the bright idea, how about we find ways to take, let's say all the mortgages of everyone in this room, a few hundred people, and take them all, buy them if you like, acquire them, put them into a kind of blender, and literally like a food processor, chop, slice each one, and then combine them. And it starts with 100, 200, then comes 10,000 individual mortgages, 50,000. Put in a huge blender, and the point of the blending, the chopping, the slicing, and the dicing, is that bad mortgages, that is mortgages made to people who really cannot pay. This was a subprime crisis. Oh, you have no income? You have no job? No problem. Buy this $500,000 home. What? A bank doing that? Why? Because that mortgage is going to go into the slice and dice machine, packaged and resold. So you got your mortgage from Bank X. Next year you're paying your money to Bank Y, then to Bank Z. Why? Your mortgage is moving, but it's not moving alone. It's moving as part of this huge blended apparatus where everybody knew that there were shitty mortgages underneath with poor value that would never be repaid. But they were blended with the better mortgages, the A category, and the rating agencies did something magical. They said, oh, you have 4 A's, 4 B's, 4 C's, and 4 D's. D's being lousy. Let's just grade this an A, this whole group. Hello? What happened to the toxic lower stuff? It vanished. And no one asked because he was selling the stuff to others. Hot potato moving, making money the whole way. And meanwhile, lots of people who should never have had mortgages in the classic sense, having mortgages, and then those mortgages going underwater, etc. This is on a national basis.
I wanted us to think about risk in general, and I was, in preparation for this, I was thinking about what you once said, that basically one could divide the world into risk makers and risk bearers. And this might sound provocative, but I was wondering if what we are seeing today in general in societies, say the influx of refugees in this society, is a process or an effort to close that gap. So where the risk bearers say, no, actually, or put it in another way, capitalism
Yes.
is a process in which the risk bearer strives to become the risk maker in this whole mechanism. So could we analyze what is happening today in society? Be it, say, take the example of the refugees, but it could also be, say, the bombing somewhere.
Yeah.
Is it the process of closing that gap between the risk maker and the risk bearer?
You know, Bonaventure, I would love to think that that is happening, but I still think there's a kind of hard line, or a kind of apartheid in our institutions, not necessarily in our minds, but in our institutions, and therefore in our minds, between those who, let's say in the old days we called entrepreneurs. But today's entrepreneurs, you know, may lose, in other words, startups and so on, you know, may fade away. But the group as a whole is controlling, and Silicon Valley is the best example. Everything is counted in billions. So the successes vastly outweigh the people who don't succeed. But gross, overall, if you say, what is innovation in Silicon Valley making, how much money, it's very large. And the number of people who suffer because of that further down the system is very large. So the bearers are still way too many, and the takers are way too few. Now, just thinking with you, if you think of some of the classic kinds of people who are in the refugee situation, who come in the Mediterranean, who, you know, take enormous risks, they are both risk takers and risk bearers, no doubt. And there I think we need to rethink what is happening. What my concern is they are both takers and bearers, and some, quote, succeed, and some drown, die, disappear, get incarcerated, etc. But I'm not sure how one would tie that collapse or shrinking of the distance between risk-taking and risk-bearing to the workings of capital. When I see capital work, I still see a very rigid segregation and very few people permitted to take the risk, lots of people who bear the risk, namely bear the downside of the risk. The small number of people get the upside of the risk. The refugee situation is different in that the taker and the bearer are often one and the same.
I'm Camila. I'm from San Francisco, moved to Berlin recently to write art criticism. My question is something you touched on briefly, which was the distinction between individuals and individuals. I was hoping you could elaborate on that. I didn't quite follow if you were playing with like divide individual or what you were getting at there.
I would like you to elaborate on the point where you were talking about the intervention into the derivative market by social entrepreneurs. And how do you feel that this could not become just another example of ethical banking, you know, free trade and all these little tiny things that basically they're just another representation of capitalism with a friendly face?
Individual is a bit of a exotic distinction, but I think it's an important one. It is familiar to anthropologists who worked in societies very different from our own and had to come to terms with how these societies operate. And both in New Guinea and then in many other parts of the world, India included, there were a series of important anthropologists, and I won't bore you or others with the genealogy, who thought the term individual was more appropriate to the basic operating unit in these societies. And there was not only for humans, that other entities also could be individuals. And individuals simply meant that you didn't have one package in which personality, motivation, character, identity, role were all collapsed. You know, you could have different things going on for different purposes. And the second thing was much more volatility. Because the individual once crystallized is simply there, you know, till death do it part. But individuals come and go. This is why, to use a very simple example, when I grew up in India in a very relatively orthodox Hindu household, My mother, for example, would be panicked about saliva from her own mouth going into the food which she was eating and come back to her, or worse, somebody else's saliva by contact coming into her. Now, this looked like a kind of simple concern about purity or something like that. But the truth is, it was really about instability. You do a lot of that and you become something else. That was the issue. In other words, her person was not so secure. The other person could move into a kind of a higher status like her, she could move down, and that was true for everything that was going on, for example, in her world, and there were other people more deeply immersed in that world for whom that was even true. And this has been documented in New Guinea, in Amazonia, all over, that people are dealing with a world of entities, agents, and so on, which is very volatile, very fast, very unstable. So that's what individual roughly captures and now we have a form of that being produced by finance by the slicing and dicing. So it's no longer who you are as a whole individual. It's what's your FICO score, what's your credit rating, what's your this, what's your that. That's all that counts. So there's a kind of partial, chopped up quality. It's not the individuality of Hindu India or New Guinea, but it has some resemblance to it. So that's a rough answer as we come. But I will also note that Deleuze, in a very couple of key passages which he doesn't develop a lot, uses this idea for our machinic world. So there's also a Deleuzian genealogy for individuality, though it's not hugely developed. Oh, sorry, the mic. Drift. Your question was about these way to socially appropriate these techniques and instruments without falling into the trap of, say, microcredit or free trade coffee or this or that or the other. You know, there's no guarantee. It's the first thing to say, because capital's cooptative powers, what the late great Herbert Marcuse called repressive tolerance, capacity to absorb things intended to undo it, is limitless. So anybody who says, do this and don't worry, capitalism will fall or die, is not being very careful. So one has to just say, possibly. And I think the main way to increase the chance of that kind of non-cooptation is by one relatively small-scale, immediate and horizontal control over what is happening and what you're doing with any assets you have, let's say as a trade union, or as a group of teachers, or as a group of neighbors. But not have it be 50,000 people, 500,000 people, because then it's gone. No way to do that. And the second one, I think, is to really gain in what I can only call financial literacy. Don't fall for the mistake that these are very complicated mathematical things. You can't understand them. You will be ruined if you try and play in this. Only experts know. These people are not experts. The bulk of people in the banks know nothing about math or quantification or anything else. There are 3 guys from India or China doing that, who are in some little cell in the back, and then 500 guys managing them, evaluating them, selling their products, negotiating prices, who know nothing about the quantitative model. It's shocking. So that's the reality of banks, hedge funds, and so on. So I think it is not that difficult, the math and the quantification, because most people use Bloomberg terminal. You have a machine. They're ordinary people like you and me, sitting in the machine, something is going by, and they're making trades. They're not quants. So anybody can do it. But the question is, with what value frame? And I think your question is a serious one, because it's not clear how you can segregate that kind of activity from the financial market as a whole, because money flows. That's a tougher problem for me than the ethics or politics of the group, is that money knows no community. It runs where it can. And how do you restrain that and not have your money enter into dark pools or this or that? That's really tough. And I don't claim to have the answer. So that's as much as I can say.